howling winds. I have friends in Florida who in this very moment are sheltered in their homes, boards on the door, unable to leave, knowing that the winds are not only powerful and rattling their homes in this moment, but going to get stronger for the next 24 hours. The winds of Irma were the strongest winds recorded over the Atlantic. Some of the islands in the Caribbean have been flattened. 90% of some islands have had their buildings like so many matchsticks tossed in through the wind. The largest rain to ever fall in the United States was Hurricane Harvey, just within days. Tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, rich and poor alike, feared for their lives, and in many cases will be struggling for years to come with the damage caused by that natural event. Some call it an act of God. So it's listed in certain insurance claims. We will not protect you for acts of God. Is it an act of God? There are some who would say that all that occurs in the world is an act of God, and on some ultimate level, perhaps that's true. But Elie Wiesel would say that somebody who said that the Holocaust was God's will is engaging in blasphemy. For at best, God's will is a question mark. But discerning and stating that this is God's choice, that's blasphemy. Because who knows what God's will is? What we do know now is that there are natural occurrences that in the past were more directly understood as God's act. Recently, we had this magnificent display of a full eclipse. Do you know there's no bracha, there is no blessing in the Jewish tradition for an eclipse? And the most common explanation is because in an earlier time when there was an eclipse, when there was that darkness, it was seen as a bad sign, as an omen, as a moment of chastisement of God for which there would be no bracha, no blessing. And today, that eclipse was not only seen as a gift of beauty rather than a rebuke. People knew exactly where the eclipse would be passing and what time to be there. What in a former time, naturally, and even in this time by some, is seen as a direct pulling of strings by God, as a sign, is now understood as part of how the world flows. There is a discussion in the Talmud, in Masechet Avodah Zarah 54b. The Mishnah there asks the following question. Avodah Zarah deals with the question of idolatry. What is idolatry? And as it moves toward the end of that tractate, the question is raised, if God is revolted by idolatry, the worshiping of objects, why doesn't God simply destroy the idols and eliminate this blemish on God's creation? And the answer given in the Mishnah, the code of conversation of the rabbis that gets edited in the 3rd century, is because if God was to destroy everything that is falsely worshipped, God would destroy the world. People worship the sun, people worship the stars. So God can't destroy all the things that people foolishly worship. And then in the discussion of the Talmud, they say, well, then why doesn't God at least destroy the things that aren't required for physical survival? The stones that people worship. Just knock them out. God's all-powerful. To which the rabbis say, if that would be the case, then the things remain standing would have all the more significance. So the sun and the moon, they would remain, and then they would have even more reason to be worshipped. And so God gives us free will to worship idols and doesn't intervene. In our prayers and in our Torah reading, I pointed out to you, we have these statements about if you obey my covenant, then I will give the clouds, the skies, the heavens rain in a timely way. But if you don't obey my covenant, then I will stop up the heavens. They will be like copper, and your fields will become hard. We said it in our prayers earlier in Deuteronomy chapter 11, right? If you observe my commandments, I will grant the rain for your land in season. But if you do not, I will shut up the skies so there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce. In our commentary, in our Eitz Chaim, the bottom half is edited by Rabbi Harold Kushner, and he writes as follows: righteous individuals may not always prosper, and wicked individuals may not always suffer the consequences of their wickedness. Would we expect God to send life-giving rain to a good person's farm, but make sure none of it fell on the fields of a wicked neighbor? Righteous communities, however, will tend to thrive and bestow blessings on all their members, the good and the less good alike. And wicked communities will bring misfortune on all their inhabitants. In other words, many people choose to read parts of the Torah as metaphors. So when the Torah says that you can't see my face, but you can see my back, God to Moses, we don't understand that literally. I knew a Baptist pastor who took all of the Bible literally. So when he read of the hills dancing, he believed that the hills literally danced. But most of us read and choose what to read through the lens of metaphor. And so a way to read these passages is the way that Rabbi Harold Kushner just did. That when you're promised, if you are righteous, you will have rain in its seasons, it doesn't mean that God determines if there is rain or not, but whether you as a community will prosper or not. I have seen remarkable people coming from countries with corrupt governments. I was in New York recently, and driver after driver of my Uber described countries in Western Africa and in Asia where corruption had taken the resources away from the people and left them with little economic sustenance, hence coming across the oceans for very little income, but with hope. Governments make a big difference in whether we live well or not. That is true. That collectively, how we operate as a society matters if there is prosperity or not, whether there is equality or not. Is it just coincidence that this is the biggest rainfall in American history, followed 1 week later by the strongest winds ever recorded over the Atlantic, with Hurricane Jose on the trail as another Hurricane 5? Climate scientists collectively say that it's due in significant part to the heating of the waters, that it create greater moisture in the air. Climate scientists are the ones who know. If all the cardiologists told me that if I continue to eat chicken fat, that it would clog up my arteries, and I would say, I know a cook who believes that chicken fat is good for me, I would be a fool, if my health was important, to rely on the cook versus 99% of the cardiologists who have spoken on this matter. We read in Parsha Shoftim recently, Shochad Iver Einei Chachamim, that a bribe will blind the eyes of the wise. Beware of greed. Beware of those who, due to their own benefit, are more willing to rely on the cook than on the cardiologist for what creates a healthy heart. It tastes good to eat that chicken fat. I love it. Gribbinus, Jewish food. But I don't eat it very much. Because the cardiologists know more about what's going to keep me healthy. And if it matters to me to be healthy, you got to pay attention to the big picture. You know I'm worked up over this because I am scared. 10 years ago, there was a debate whether there was a climate change. Today, anybody who denies climate change is blind. This is not coincidence. And 10 years from now, it's going to get worse, year by year. I wrote an article, it'll be in both the Shofar and the J-Life, that I wrote a month ago on climate change. Because every year, year after year, it is hotter. What was the temperature last week in Tustin? When's the last time you remember that kind of temperature? There's always been hot. There's always been hurricanes. There's always been floods. But it is the intensity, the repetitiveness, and the increasing occurrence that makes this different. We are ready for a heart attack as a planet. And to deny it is to stuff yourself at the table of largesse, ignoring reality, choosing to blind our eyes. Is it true that if we fail to recognize the dangers of climate change, then there will indeed be starvation in the world? It's already happening. The vast majority of immigrants to Europe are not coming from Syria. They're coming from parts of Africa that have been in drought for a significant amount of time. Coming across from Libya in those boats, because throughout Africa the land no longer produces its crops. And in America, we also, when it's 107 degrees outside in Orange County, farmers are also struggling. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, greed is real. May we be created in your image to open our eyes, not to take bribes, but to be aware that indeed, as the Torah teaches, but teaches not literally, but teaches through metaphor, Olam kamin hago noheg, the world operates according to its order. So in Masechet Avodah Zarah we are told. That means, Al tismoch b'nes, do not rely on a miracle. What we do as communities matters. If we don't listen to the cardiologists, we are fools. If we don't listen to the climate scientists, it's only because we are greedy. Ribono Shalom. That is not politics. That is science. That eclipse is a product of predictable patterns, and so is climate change. Ribono Shalom. May we live in your image with the health of your creation as our responsibility. Amen.